Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here with a really important update. I want to start with this tweet from Chuck Woolery. I'll just come out and say it. Is it possible that the Wuhan, China virus was not an accident? I think we all know the answer to that. I bring you this soundbite from 2015 and Bill Gates.
When I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement, filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes.
Friends, before we go any further, just a real quick note. Right now, over at redpillliving.com/SGT, we've got a special offer on the coffee. Through this Sunday night, you can save 17% with coupon code SGT Coffee. Now it's just on the coffee. If you want to get anything else over there, you can use coupon code SGT to save 10% on anything else. All right, guys, I just want to share a very important document for you. It happens to be from the Rockefeller Foundation, and I think it's very eye-opening. We know what's going on right now is giving not only the government broad sweeping powers, but local governments, state governments, even mayors are taking up unbelievable powers and claiming they have the authority to do all sorts of things, like seizing private property, all in the name of this virus, this pandemic, which is now evidently sweeping the globe, we're told. And I don't think for 1 minute it's a hoax. But what I do think is that it's giving the bankers exactly what they want. They've been foaming at the mouth for a pandemic like this one for more than a decade. And we need to be very, very careful about the powers that we're eagerly giving up to these governments in the name of battling the coronavirus and keeping us safe. And it reminds me very much of the prophetic warnings we heard from Aaron Russo just previous to his death.
And the goals of the banking industry, not just the Federal Reserve System, but the private banks in Germany and England, all over Italy, all over the world, they all work together. They're all central banks, and they're all part of the Communist Manifesto. You know, central banking is one of the major planks of the Communist Manifesto. We talk about America being a capitalistic country, but yet at the same time we have a central bank that plans everything for us, right? And the graduated income tax is another plank of the Communist Manifesto, right? So right there you have two major planks of the Communist Manifesto that have been brought in because of the Federal Reserve System, okay? So the ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is giving me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish.
And before we get to that Rockefeller document, this from Gina Miller on Twitter. Email your MP. They must read coronavirus bill extremely carefully. Transferring vast powers for 2 years, very scary. Why not pass for 12 months with review and extension clause for further 12 months if necessary? Powers of arrest, detention, quarantine, and burials. This is just in the UK, folks. Imagine these broad new sweeping powers, this power grab, and the trillions being printed on the back of any other excuse. And I think people would be outraged. But give the people a scary pandemic, and everybody seems to fall in line. The document I'm about to share with you comes from the Rockefeller Foundation, and credit to Dave C. for sending me this. Scenarios for the future of technology and international development. I'm going to skip down. By the way, this report was produced by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Global Business Network in May of 2010. I'm going to skip down to page 18 and just read a few paragraphs and tell me if what we're seeing today isn't pretty much what they wanted all along. Page 18 starts, lockstep, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. Remember, this was written in 2010. They write, in 2012, the pandemic that the world has been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months. The majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. The pandemic blanketed the planet, though disproportionate numbers died in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the U.S., but across borders. However, a few countries did fare better, China in particular. Now remember, guys, this is just fiction. It's a projection written in 2010. They say the Chinese government's quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant near hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus from earlier than in other countries and enabling a swifter post-pandemic recovery. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics to transnational terrorism, to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. Friends, I cannot stress enough how important a document like this is. It's truly a smoking gun of what we've been warned by Aaron Russo and others is coming. It's part of their plan. We've known it forever. How were they going to get it? It turns out a pandemic is the perfect way to garner more unilateral, unchecked power. Back to the document. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms: biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, and tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interests. In many developed countries, enforced cooperation with a suite of new regulations and agreements slowly but steadily restored both order and, importantly, economic growth. So again, let's just review what's happened so far. A virus has been released, whether by accident or on purpose. You decide. Many have pointed to evidence that it is a bioweaponized virus, so more deadly than it otherwise would be. Whether that's true or not, you decide. But the end game is more unilateral power, more unchecked power, and more control by the government, by the corporations, and I would note, more bailouts for the banks. Now again, friends, that was from the 2010 document from the Rockefeller Foundation titled Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And I want to wrap up with just a few passages from my friend Donald Jeffries, who wrote The Coronavirus Hobgoblin. The great H.L. Mencken, a classical liberal, when such creatures still existed, once wrote, quote, "The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety. by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary, end quote. I find myself repeating this quote more and more these days. America and the rest of the world is in the throes of a panic that has never been seen before outside the fanciful scripts of Hollywood. A new super virus, the coronavirus, is being hyped nonstop by our state-controlled media as the new bubonic plague. The fear porn emanating from our television sets is relentless. And I'll let you read the rest of this article for yourself. I'll leave the link below this video. But suffice to say, whether real or manufactured, whether truly deadly or overstated, what's happening right now globally is exactly what the Rockefeller Foundation wants and has wanted for over a decade, for the people to allow their power and their freedom to be stripped, and for more unilateral, top-down control from the very government that is supposed to be by the people and for the people. Now, friends, I share all of this with you not because I don't support our president. Clearly I do. But, as you all know by now, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And it seems to me that if we're not very vigilant and vocal, more and more of our fleeting freedoms may be taken in the name of saving us from this particular hobgoblin. Thanks so much for watching, friends. And for real news 24/7, you can always visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless. Bye-bye.
If ever comes a day where they try to force vaccines on all of us, including adults, man, people better take a stand.